Good evening. Well, I hope you are enjoying our festivities, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Iowa Blood Center. This is the evening program that we are starting right now. And Erin Jordan, a reporter from the Gazette, will run the show here. So we have our panelists. She will introduce the panelists. But I just wanted to share some comments in addition to those that I shared with you this morning. So much of the discussion from the panelists will concern the future. So now I want to say a few things, details in fact, about the very near future. So I wanted to give you some updates about what's going on with our key activities within the Iowa Blood Center. And I will start by sharing with you that we have requests for over 100 of additional grid sensors from across Iowa. Now, of course, that takes some money to build and deploy them, but I'm also happy to announce that Iowa Department of Natural Resources, they committed some funding for a portion of those. So it's not a big portion, but nevertheless it will be a good start, and we will continue searching for funding. So that's one update. Another one is that just a couple of months ago we connected the data that come in real time from our sensors with our forecasting model. So before, for all these years, we had our models running like open loop, so that's a technical term. But another way to put it is that the models had no idea that all these sensors are in the field. And of course, the sensors had no idea that we have some models. But now, they are married together. And that greatly improves the quality of the forecast. So far, we connected the data from USGS stations to our models, and that improves significantly our forecast. And next, we are testing connecting the Iowa grid sensor data with the models, and the first indications are that there will be further improvement in the quality of the forecast. Also, many of you may not know much about these models, but you see the data from the sensors through the Iowa Flood Information System. And you also know that we have two versions, so to speak, of the system. One is designed for desktop computers, and this is probably what most of you use. But there is also a mobile version that you can use from smart devices. So we are going to make major redesigns of both, but in particular the mobile version. So in the next few months, you will experience improved performance from both of these systems. And hopefully that will enhance the usage of those systems. Finally, the inundation maps. So every year we are adding maps for 2-3 communities, depending on our time reserves. But here I wanted to announce that we have an agreement, and we are actually in the process of adding to IFC inundation maps for the Mississippi River. Well, so you may say, okay, well, so that's great. So the Corps of Engineers, they are sharing, the maps that they have, and we will put them in the system. And one can say, what about the Missouri River? Well, the bad news is that the maps that the Corps developed for the Missouri River are obsolete. because of the destruction that happened there to the levees, and so forth. So, but that will be a subject of more discussion from our, panelists. So those are quick updates. I don't want to be between you and the panel. So Erin, please take over and run the show. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And I'm really honored to be here tonight as part of this discussion. As a reporter for the Cedar Rapids Gazette and previously for the Des Moines Register, I've gotten to cover a lot of different aspects of the Iowa Flood Center since it was created in 2009. And this is a program that truly serves the state of Iowa and the Midwest. And the fact that we have so many people here tonight is a sign of that. We could fill this room many times over by the number of people that it serves. So over the next hour or so, we're going to dig into that service by the Iowa Flood Center and talk with our panelists about how flood planning has changed in the last decade and what evolution is still needed to better protect people, natural resources, and the environment. So some people have already submitted questions. I've got a few good ones here, and we'll kind of filter those into our conversation. If you have a burning question you want to ask, just bring it on up, and we'll get it in here to the conversation. So first, we wanted to start by asking each of our panelists to tell us briefly about yourselves and your connection with the Iowa Flood Center. Maybe we'll start with Laura.
What an honor to go first. Okay. My name is Laura Fries. I'm the Executive Director for Northeast Iowa Resource Conservation and Development, which is a nonprofit based out of Postville, Iowa. We've been working on watershed work since 1998, and particularly Huck 8 watersheds, for those of you that know, larger rivers. We really try to mobilize people across the landscape to work together to solve water quality and flooding issues. And we became involved with the Iowa Flood Center, I guess several years ago now, because the Turkey River watershed was a large watershed that we knew people were concerned about, and they asked us to work in. And when the opportunity came up, we put in an application to do some planning for them to help them form their watershed management authority. So that's when we first started working with the Flood Center. Fortunately, they were selected, and the work that the Flood Center has had a phenomenal impact on the entire area. So that watershed is over 1 million acres. And so now we work in actually 3 large watersheds, including the Turkey Still, but also in the Upper Iowa River watershed and the Upper Wassapinican River watershed. And we finished the plan in the Turkey, and now we're working on plans. We just finished the plan in the Upper Iowa, and we're finalizing the plan in the Wapsie, and you can see those plans online. But without the Flood Center, none of it would have happened. So.
I'm Larry Barber. I'm a faculty member in Civil and Environmental Engineering, and I hold the Edwin B. Green Chair of Economics at the University of Iowa. I served as the Director of IIHR Computer Science and Engineering from 2004 to 2017. And looking back, it's interesting because when I interviewed for the directorship, I remember interviewing with the dean, and he asked me the 2 things I really wanted to do. What would they be? And I said one was to integrate environmental engineering and sciences more into the IIHR program, and second, make IIHR more relevant to the state of Iowa. And I'd begun to work towards that in the first couple of years of my directorship. And lo and behold, in 2008, we had a major flood that impacted so much of eastern Iowa, and making IHR relevant to the state happened quite naturally since then. So I, together with Vitek Karaski, co-founded the Iowa Flood Center, and been actively involved in the leadership of the program since.
Hi, I'm Rick Wolfcole. I'm with Buchanan County Emergency Management. Kind of bringing that small county perspective. My perspective comes from being doing this since 1997 on a part-time basis, and then turned full-time shortly after our record floods in a small county in 1999. The vision of what happens before and after the conception, if you will, of the Iowa Flood Center in 2008, our elected officials seen a need. There was then Governor Culper that put together a a little office, if you would call, the Rebuild Iowa situation that we had, and then a vision. He said, we know we can do things better. So we come together as an association in emergency management. We come together as relationships and partnerships, and we built what we have today with the help of our elected officials. So I'm here to give that perspective. And I think I was asked to go late because I was going to look and sound better after a reception like this with alcohol. So that's just my thought.
Good evening, I'm Robert Hogan, State Senator from Cedar Rapids. And my involvement with the Flood Center started with a meeting that Senator Bolton, Senator Dvorsky and I had with Larry and VTech in October of 2008 to see what the University of Iowa and specifically IIHR could do more to help us prevent future flood damage. That was the goal, that was the target. Obviously, for those of you who weren't for those of you who were in the area, you probably remember 2008 pretty vividly. For those of you who weren't, let me just tell you, it was widespread devastation. Here in Iowa City, here in Cedar Rapids, where I represent, and then communities across the state. And we had to not just rebuild from that disaster, we had to rebuild in a way that was smarter and safer and more sustainable. And one essential component of that was developing expertise in our state that would help guide that redevelopment and help prevent future flood damage. And out of that meeting and some really good presentations at the state legislature in January of 2009, the Iowa Flood Center was born. And in June of 2009, and happy 10th birthday.
One of the ways many people, including journalists like me, interact with the Iowa Flood Center, maybe for the first time, is through the Iowa Flood Information System, and VTech mentioned it. Now up here on the screen, we're flashing through some different slides that will show some screens from IFC, so those of you who aren't familiar with it, you might catch one of those. And it would take at least an hour or more to show you all the functions of this amazing online tool. It's an interactive online tool. But it's got data from 250 sensors, inundation maps for major cities, and many other features. Larry, I was hoping you would tell us a little bit about how that came about and how you decided what to include.
The Iowa Flood Information System, really give VTech the credit for being the architect of that system. And the early stages of it, we're trying to assemble all of the federal data and state data that was related to hydrology and flooding, put it into one place, and make it easily accessible to all the people of Iowa. And with that as the vision, jargon-free, accessible, quantitative, scientific data, I think it's really accomplished that. And I always like to think back to 2016 when we got a call from the then director of Iowa's Homeland Security and Emergency Management, Mark Scout. He shared with us that he was traveling all throughout the Sioux River Basin with Governor Bragson as the evolution of the 2016 flood was happening. And in each community, he said in each and every community, someone came up and thanked the governor, the Iowa Flood Center, the Iowa Flood Information System as the difference between 16 and 2008. When they didn't have information in 2008, they didn't know where to move their belongings, they didn't know they'd be in the impacted areas or not. That changed by 2016 information system.
So,
Aaron, if I could just jump in. I mean, just for those who have not had the chance to use it, it's a tool you can go to and you can scale up the flood and see where a community is going to inundate. So in 2016 in Cedar Rapids, people would ask, well, if this flood goes higher and the first line of defense doesn't work, am I going to be inundated? And they had a resource that was block by block, building by building they could go to and see, yes, this will affect this area, no, it won't affect another area. So it really helped people know what they need to do to prepare for that flood.
that's a great example, and I was going to ask you, Rick, how have you found the flood information system useful in your area?
Absolutely. Our communities use this in the planning piece. When we get pulled into any type of plan updates and stuff that we do, we want to make sure that we are looking at the areas that could be affected, the populations that are in those areas that are affected, and then through community assessments, through building code enforcement, and or just a little bit codification to make sure we teach and educate all the way up to our elected officials, but our general public about doing the right thing. And that's kind of been the crux behind all of this, because just when you think you've got everybody taught and brought up to speed, another election happens and you get to start all over. So these are the things that we have to continually do, and we have to make sure that we're looking at. And we have a takeaway, and I know we'll probably talk about takeaways after the end of things here. We've got to make sure we continue that educating, and we've got to make sure that we continue the resilience of making sure in this IFC product that we have here, that helps us and aids us in doing that.
So I wanted to ask you, how has Iowa's flood response and preparedness changed over the past year? And this is a question anyone can feel free to chime in on.
Past year?
The past 10 years.
Oh, 10 years, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
That one I'll start with. I was going to say, because I'm an old fart as we've been doing this. Even when you see some of the information that come out, I think we started the stuff that I turned in. I had 14 presidentials, and I wasn't considering the ones that were closed. I was lucky enough at the start of this year to close another one, so that made 15. But we just got added in 4421, so that makes number 16 for me that we've dealt with here. In that inception of the start of it, it changes things by being involved with these assessments, being involved in these communities, of reacting differently and or faster. For instance, we didn't know, as the record flooding for us was approaching, we didn't know how that was going to affect us. Now as that information is shared, and we've got partnerships with the Iowa Flood Center, National Weather Service, and those relationships that we have, we enter that data in, and we know at the time that we even so much as think about this flood levels, getting at those levels, we put that information out there. We start pumping stations early. You heard the success stories with Iowa City today about closing off ports to some of these utility areas and tunnels that they've got. Awesome that they won't have to worry about some of this flooding that they had to do. We didn't do that without the help and assistance of the Iowa Flood Center and our other partnerships.
Laura, do you have any thoughts about up in your area, how you've seen, flood preparedness change?
I would say that people can, just in a general term, regular, everyday people can prepare better. And they know if they need to do something or not, right? Just like you were saying. Rod Marlatt is here, and he would tell this story, so I'll tell it for him. But, this was this year. He's a conservation board director, and the conservation board directors have been involved with water management authorities, all the emergency managers and supervisors, so everybody knows about this. But when he got a call, a producer asked him, he said, I've got cattle that are now surrounded by water. And I need to know, is the river going to keep rising? Do I have to try to get them out of here on a boat? What am I going to do? And so he can say, look, go right here, go to this, and you will find out what's happening above you. And then
I don't know how to do that, how do you do it for me?
yeah. So he said he didn't know how to do it, he wanted Rod to do it for him. But ultimately, people are starting to figure out, I would say the average person is starting to figure out that their county people have more resources than they used to. So that's how they are using it. So they're saying, hey, tell me what to do. I know you know now. And then I think those county people are starting to get more information out to the average citizen.
Aaron, I would say there is one other thing, though, just to sort of caution people about. Because, for example, this year, with the devastating flooding in southwest Iowa, they had just done that in 2011. And I think they kind of felt like, okay, we did that in 2011, and that sort of set a mark. And we're maybe better prepared for another flood like 2011, and this year it was much bigger, much faster. And I think one of the things we continually have to challenge people to do, and use the resources of the Flood Center and other resources, is to think, okay, what if the next flood is more extreme? What if it's bigger and more devastating or quicker or looks different? And I think we do continue to have to challenge people to integrate risk management, hazard management, preparedness into their thinking, and it's probably especially important for local elected officials and maybe the state to provide some guidance on that. Because I don't think people are still at the point where they're thinking beyond their prior experience. And I think we need to do that, part of the climate change, but there are other reasons as well.
Have you seen changes, Larry, just in terms of preparedness? Or?
Well, absolutely. And again, I think the tool is there. I think it's a wonderful tool. We get a lot of positive feedback, and we get constructive feedback as well on how we can change it. Just to go to Senator Hoag's comment, each one of these storms is very different. And we used to hear the term a lot of the perfect storm. The perfect storm had hit in all these different areas, and we've tried to caution people against using that language because it seems that each and every year we have a perfect storm. And so with that in mind, Dr. Antonio Renas and I guided a student in the last year who went back and reanalyzed the 2008 flood in Cedar Rapids and took out the last 24 hours of rainfall, set that aside. And then we looked at other real storms that impacted Iowa, and we replaced that last 24 hours with those storms. We took storms out of the Turkey River, the Upper Iowa, from different parts of the state, and we could demonstrate and simulate discharges in Cedar Rapids, not at 145,000 cubic feet per second, 245,000 cubic feet per second. So imagine another 100,000 cubic feet per second passing through Cedar Rapids in 2008. We already had a devastating event. And Senator Hoag, 30,000 people evacuated, water's 10 feet over the levees, and we were looking at another 4 to 6 feet of inundation in Cedar Rapids. So like what had happened in the Missouri River, like the experience here in eastern Iowa, 93 was the benchmark. And we would have won the fight on our campus if the levels would have stopped at 93, but they went past by 4 feet, and Cedar Rapids by 10 feet. So the information system now provides not just benchmarking, but real data as these events evolve.
Can I say one more thing? So actually coming up on the screen, there's a lot of different things that we did today, so we're kind of reliving what we learned. But I would say data that University of Iowa has, Flood Center, IIHR, even the emergency manager, doesn't really mean anything unless it has context for the people that data is telling something, right? So I really believe in the last 10 years, the biggest thing that the Iowa Flood Center has done is change the discussion about flooding, right? And so they've educated a vast number of people, just in our watersheds, thousands of people, to start to think about what a watershed is, what resiliency is, and then engage them in the research and in the data collection, and then helping them understand what it means. So otherwise, they couldn't go online and use the system. They wouldn't be participating in putting out the rain gauge sensors, the soil sensors, and they wouldn't understand what any of it meant for kids. And so the fact that the Flood Center has it is one thing, but if they hadn't gone out and worked with all the communities and all of our watershed management authorities and all those partners, then none of us would have understood how to use it, and none of us would use it.
No, Laura, you mentioned something I wanted to hit on here. So Larry, the first time I heard about the watershed approach, it was from you. What is the watershed approach and how does that intersect with flooding?
Yeah, so the watershed approach, of course, it's hard to summarize that in a minute or two, but we began in about 2010 with a project up in the Turkey River watershed, the Upper Cedar, as well as down the Soper Chippewa Creeks. And the idea there was to come up with ways of holding water back on private lands through agricultural conservation practices, reducing flooding during heavy rainfall, and improving water quality year-round. We had a really nice Iowa watershed project that was in those 3 watersheds. And as that program was ending, Housing and Urban Development joined forces with the Rockefeller Foundation to launch the National Disaster Resilience Competition. That was $1 billion of funding that were available. We led the proposal effort for the state of Iowa and brought $96.9 million to the state. $40 million is helping 3 urban areas in the state, and about $40 million in 8 rural watersheds. And this is really setting, I think, laying the groundwork for the future. If we could get Iowa funded, if we could have a natural resources trust fund in the state, we now have watershed management authorities. It's a local governance structure. They have watershed plans that provide a 20-year vision. We have the sensors and the models already built, and we've given them experience through the funding that we have for the conservation practices, but the need is $10 billion. So we need $10 billion to really address both our water quantity and water quality.
Now, we've talked a little bit already just about the devastating flooding that we saw on the Missouri River and then also now the Mississippi River as well. We know from observational evidence and also from the modeling done at the university that climate change is at play with this increased flooding. And we also, I think going through on the slides here, we have some research by a scientist here at the Flood Center, Antonio Arenas, and put together an amazing timeline of the past 12 months, kind of putting flood events in perspective with photos and maps. And it's an example of the type of great work that's going on at the Flood Center. So Senator Hoke, I know you've been on the ground in western Iowa, when things were at their worst. Can you tell us a little bit about what you saw?
Sure. I mean, it was widespread flood damage. I think one of the differences between what we experienced in 2008 and what happened in 2019 in southwest Iowa is there are more people living here. If you take combined populations of Fremont and Mills County, you're talking about 26,000 people. But for the individuals who have experienced it, I mean, it is heartache. In Hamburg, they had just done this in 2011. And here they lose all their water supply from the city, their sewer is gone, and you got roughly a third of the town underwater. And that's devastating. And the heartfelt pleas that many of us heard in 2008, we need immediate help. People are, workers lose their job, they're taking their kids out of their schools, they're moving, they're voting with their feet, they've lost their house, people are moving. Glenwood was hit badly, a lot of businesses out there. And of course, when I was out there, you couldn't even get to Pacific Junction. I mean, it finished its, 75 days underwater, and fingers crossed that.
But just last Friday when I was there, you couldn't get there again. So it's just,
and the level of damage along the levees and Interstate 29 is really severe. And I think the state of Iowa is going to have to make some hard decisions about that area, because how much money do you spend on trying to restore things the way they were, or do we have to do something new and different and better? And I think it's going to be very challenging. And this is we got to remember at some level we're one state, and it is hard for people in eastern Iowa who are not getting the media coverage from what's happening there. I remember in 2010 asking an audience, well, what do you think about the 500-year flood in Iowa we had last week? And nobody knew what I was talking about because it was in Cherokee. Well, Cherokee's not in your readership, right? It's not in the TV station's viewership. It doesn't get the attention, but we do have to be mindful that people are experiencing the heartache and the trauma that goes with these disasters in our state right now. I want to say one other thing about Davenport and Burlington, which I've been to both. Those were hard disasters for those communities to experience. The Mississippi had been up for so long. I mean, record-setting length of flood time in Dubuque, Davenport, Burlington. And it's hard. I will tell you, when I was in Davenport, the damage was more confined. It wasn't like the widespread downtown flooding we suffered in Cedar Rapids in 2008. But for every individual, business and the people who do live in downtown, that's that same heartache and trauma, and they shouldn't be penalized just because there's only 40 of them instead of 4,000. Right? We've got to still be compassionate and help people recover and rebuild. And I think both those communities, both Burlington and Davenport, are going to have to make some tough decisions about their long-term redevelopment.
I wanted to ask an audience question here. It says, there are climate models that can be downscaled to watershed levels. What would it take to develop new flow estimates and future risk estimates for Iowa?
So that's a really good question, and certainly, Antonio's done some of this work in our watershed approach. One of the things in the climate assessment says that the extreme events are going to get more extreme. And so we've done some of our modeling work by taking the top 5 or 10% rainfall events and increasing the magnitude, looking at the impact of that changing climate and changing rainfall intensity on the discharges and responses in extremes. That's really important. I think one of the other things that I think is so important and really exemplified what happened this year is we went into the fall with nearly 95% soil saturation all throughout Iowa, all around the Midwest. We had a relatively mild start to the winter, and then we hear things like polar vortex, bomb cyclones, and these major extreme massive weather events that consistent throughout the winter. We stayed cold really late. We had the equivalent of 6 to 8 inches of water content in the snow across much of the Midwest. And then we put rain on top of that snow, on top of frozen soils. And so the change in seasonality is another part of climate change that could be as devastating as increases of these heavy rainfall events. If we start to see this happening again earlier into the winter season and later into the fall season, over and over and over again, it will change our flood reaction and response.
So as you mentioned, Senator Hope, there's tough decisions facing a variety of communities in Iowa. I believe Davenport's considering now for the first time whether to build a permanent flood wall there, and there's those other questions in southwest Iowa. How do communities weigh these choices when looking at the whole watershed? I don't know, Laura, if you've had any
Our communities are really small. But I can tell you that, like in the Turkey River watershed, 4 of them are gone. They're just gone. They don't exist anymore. So that's their option.
Like Elk River,
They're just
Garland?
gone.
That was the flood of 98, 99.
So the runs that remain have been greatly impacted. I mean, they actually, at the Watershed Management Authority meetings, which was fascinating to watch the social interaction there, those people that live downstream stood up and said to the people upstream of them, looked them right in the eye and said, "You're flooding my community, and it's never flooded before. You're sending your water downstream too fast. What are you going to do about it?" So they really challenged them. They made it personal. And so the upstream communities, more than ever before, are taking action. So in at least Northeast Iowa, when this flips through and you see the federal disaster declarations, and you mentioned it earlier, and I don't know if everybody caught it, but Northeast Iowa has had more federal disaster declarations than most states, right? And it's a big deal. That means we flooded that many times. It's due to flooding. And so finally, the upstream communities are saying, we're going to do something because we care about you. So it's created a watershed community. So that's what has to happen in these bigger cities too. They have to appeal to the people above them. And I know it's harder. It's a little bit harder than it is up there. But all of our people now are connected. But it can be done. And if they don't, it won't change.
Well, that's something that Davenport has expressed, that they know that if they built a higher, more permanent flood wall, it would have impact on folks down the river. You've kind of counseled them about that.
That's right. And I think one of the things that I've tried to share with people, and oftentimes in this kind of flood community, we talk about the Netherlands, and then the Dutch having 10,000-year landing storm, surge protection, and that's wonderful. But really, I think where they should really be applauded is their work on the river. The work that they've done in the coastal area, that was simply a matter of organizing a lot of money to build 10,000-year storm surge protection. But the Dutch have adopted a route for the river approach, and that really took leadership, where they moved businesses, they moved residents, and they moved agriculture out of the floodplain. They're allowing their river room to flood, knowing that it is a part of the natural floodplain evolution of our rivers. And if we wanted to try to take that sort of approach in Iowa, again, it would take leadership. It takes leadership beyond just community leadership. It has to be at a watershed scale. Some cases that could be a small watershed, but we're facing these challenges at the scale of the Mississippi River and the Missouri River. And so it takes the governors getting together, it takes federal leadership, and we've got to start moving away from the river and getting out of these highly flood-prone areas.
I just would add that I really, these are hard decisions, but I think there are a lot of examples now our state of where communities can make those decisions and can come out stronger, right? I mean, if you just think of life as flood avoidance, by the way, that's not a bad thing. If you want to just spend your whole life focused on flood avoidance, that's not a bad thing, but it can get a little dreary. And so, you know, I mean, we're sitting here right on the bank of the Iowa River here, where Iowa City is finishing a project that was partially funded by the state Iowa Flood Mitigation Program. You've seen the B branch in Dubuque dealing with flood risk and doing it in a way that not just reduces flood risk, but improves the community, right? And there are hard decisions on the margin to get there. There really are. Cedar Rapids, our recovery was very slow. You know, people were living in FEMA trailers, right? I don't know, a year. Some people were there over a year in FEMA. And a lot of frustration, a lot of emotions. City of Cedar Rapids did make a decision about here's the dry side, here's the wet side going forward. That was a tough decision to make, but they made it. And they made it so that people then could, instead of spending their time about whether I'm going to be on the wet side or the dry side, they could spend their time, okay, these are the rules. Now I want to make the best out of our community and the best out of our life. And I think that really helped. It helped guide better redevelopment. And fingers crossed, we will get a permanent flood protection system built before there's the next major flood. And again, fingers are just crossed on that because we're 11 years later, construction is underway, things are happening. But you know, if next year we're looking at a repeat or something worse than the flood of 2008, we're in deep trouble. 2016, which is held out as this great example of preparedness, and we were much better prepared. There was a lot of involvement. The Flood Center really helped. It also helped that the flood forecast was for 25 feet and went down to 22 feet, rather than being forecast at 25 feet and going up to 28 feet, right? That made a huge difference.
I mean, following that extreme rain that happened, you know, up in Clarksville, you know, we're really fortunate that you had 5 days where we did put rain on top of that floodway like in 2000.
Right. If we put flood on it, if we put more rain on it, we could have been right back in the 2008 situation. And as much, you know, as good as we did preparing, there would have been a lot more damage if that had happened.
I wanted to ask another audience question here. It says, what should be the first priority for Iowa to become more resilient to flooding? Anyone can chime in here.
We might all disagree.
Well, we might.
No, that's good. Let's get 4 answers. That's great.
Number one, let the rivers breathe. Number 2, flood mitigation. Number 3, comprehensive watershed management.
I would agree with that. Flood mitigation and training and education. Training and education to the point of this is tough decisions that have to be made. Those tough decisions are going to be made on a local level. I see quite a few elected officials in here that I know, some faces that were introduced this morning. I'm going to tell you folks, it's hard. It's hard decisions that are made, but if you make them and if you look at that, FEMA's got a cost-benefit analysis product that you can go out there as communities, be involved with that, get involved with that, make sure that your elected officials are looking at that when they're doing those things. We had a community, we have a small community with 172 homes in a mitigation project since we've been doing this since record flooding in 1999 in a small county like ours. Now let me rephrase that a little bit. 172 homes, that's 172 families. And roughly by the national average, that's over 450 people. That's over 4 times the people that are in this room right now. That makes a difference. They've been directly affected again in 2001, 2004, 2007, 2008, 2013, and again in this right now, the flooding that's happening right now. I guess I said the one that's we're in 4421. So with that being said, getting involved with that, tough decisions that are made because why? What's that take away? It takes away funding. Does it, elected officials? That takes away your taxation. So what some communities are doing, you look at that cost-benefit analysis, you're looking at that, you're putting together projects and or programs, you're having those elected officials meet with your building people, your code people, and they're meeting with developers. So that where can we take people out of harm's way, make development for affordable housing, so that we can get people to stay in your community and making sure that we have those resiliences built. We want to make sure of that. So.
That's a great example,
So in the fall of 2009, there were a group of people, and I think there were 4 subcommittees that came together and really worked on developing recommendations to the legislature for their consideration in 2010. And we came up with these 22 or 23 recommendations, and at the time, only 3 of them came forward as bill language. Many of them were discussed at length, and it was a really thoughtful process. Unfortunately, at the time, we weren't ready to move more of those forward as a statewide policy. But I think we should go back to them. We should go back and revisit those recommendations. The ones we did move forward, rethink, given all of the disasters we had in the last 10 years, what really needs to be done. And I think that was a very thoughtful process. I thought it was informative. I hope to the legislature, and I think it really set the tone for the 2010 session.
I know it seems like it to people that don't live here, but you all know that Iowa is different across the state. And watershed management authorities that have formed across the state, every one of them is locally driven. So boards of supervisors, community leaders, saltwater district commissioners, and many of them are producers that serve in that capacity. They'll appoint someone or they are that person. Every watershed is different, every one of them. So we need to listen to these local leaders that are telling us what to do in their watershed. They know, like we said, it's their neighbors. They know the people that are there. They know how to motivate them. They know what practices will work because of what the Iowa Flood Center's done, IHR. They know what will be impactful, and they're behind it. So yes, we need to do that. Second thing I would say that nobody mentioned, Iowa is an agricultural state, and we have smart producers. They can figure it out, and they are trying. So we have a project right now. It's called Multi-Cropping Project, and you can follow it on Twitter. But there are hundreds of producers right now in Iowa, and actually around the Midwest, that are trying to figure out how to grow 2 crops at once so the ground isn't bare. It increases soil health, which holds a lot of water. Right? If the soil is healthier, it holds water better. So they're trying to figure out, they're creating the equipment, they're creating the systems. The producers are all telling each other how to do it. No one's leading, they're leading themselves. We're just facilitating it. It's just an example that, remember, we're rural. The communities are seeing the brunt of it, but most of the state, the producers can help us figure it out. How can they hold water on their land? If you look at what the Flood Center has done, what IHR has done, what Antonio has modeled, and he didn't just put in structures. He also said, if you put in native habitat, if you put in cover crops, and that's basically what multi-cropping is, right? So we have other options, and if we implement them all, we